The once peaceful streets of Maple Grove erupted into pure pandemonium as the mysterious illness spread like wildfire through the community. Sarah watched in horrified disbelief as her neighbors, friends, and even children transformed before her eyes, their skin taking on a ghastly pallor and their eyes becoming lifeless and vacant. Within hours, the infected began attacking the unaffected, their jaws snapping and hands clawing with a singular primal hunger. Chaos reigned supreme as people fled their homes, some desperately trying to escape the carnage, others succumbing to the illness and joining the ranks of the undead. Sarah's heart raced as she ushered her husband Tom and their two young children, Lily and Ethan, into their SUV, narrowly avoiding being overrun by the shambling, moaning horde. "What's happening?" Lily cried, her voice trembling with fear as she watched the disturbing scene unfold outside the car window. "I don't know, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her own voice shaking as she struggled to maintain her composure. "But we have to get out of here. Hold on tight, okay?" Tom gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, as he navigated the car through the gridlocked streets, swerving to avoid colliding with abandoned vehicles and the ever-increasing number of zombies. Ethan whimpered in the backseat, clutching his sister's hand as they witnessed the horrific transformation of their once familiar neighborhood. "Where are we going?" Tom asked, his eyes darting nervously between the road and the rearview mirror. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her mind racing to come up with a plan. "We just need to get as far away from here as possible." As they approached the main intersection, their path was suddenly blocked by a massive pileup of cars, their occupants either trapped inside or stumbling among the wreckage, having already succumbed to the illness. Tom slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching in protest, and the family found themselves surrounded by the undead. "We're trapped," Ethan cried, his voice shrill with panic. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she scanned their surroundings, desperately searching for a way out. In the distance, she spotted the familiar red and white sign of a grocery store, its doors still seemingly intact. "There," she exclaimed, pointing towards the store. "If we can make it inside, we might be able to barricade ourselves and wait this out." Tom nodded grimly, his jaw set with determination. "Okay, hold on to your seats. This is going to be a bumpy ride." With a deep breath, Tom floored the accelerator, the SUV lurching forward as it plowed through the abandoned cars and the grasping, snarling zombies. Sarah clung to the door handle, her eyes squeezed shut as they careened towards the grocery store, praying they would make it in time. The impact of the SUV crashing through the store's entrance shattered the glass, and Sarah felt the vehicle lurch to a stop as it collided with a display of canned goods. Shaken but unharmed, the family quickly scrambled out of the car, slamming the doors behind them and rushing towards the front of the store. "Quickly, help me barricade the doors," Tom shouted, already pulling a heavy metal shelving unit towards the entrance. Sarah and the children joined him, their hands trembling as they worked to block the way, their only hope of survival now resting on the strength of their makeshift defenses. As the moans and pounding of the zombies outside grew louder, Sarah pulled her children close, her heart racing with fear and uncertainty. She knew that the battle for their lives had only just begun. The once familiar aisles of the Maple Grove grocery store had been transformed into a place of refuge and desperation. Sarah, Tom, Lily, and Ethan huddled behind the hastily assembled barricade, their eyes darting anxiously as they listened to the growing chorus of agonized moans and the relentless pounding of the undead against the blocked entrance. "Do you think we'll be safe in here?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she clung to her mother's arm. Sarah wrapped a protective arm around her daughter, trying to exude a sense of calm that she did not truly feel. "I hope so, sweetheart. Your father and I are going to do everything we can to keep us all safe." Tom stood by the barricade, his jaw set with grim determination. "We need to fortify this place further. Who knows how long we'll be holed up in here." Nodding, Sarah gently released Lily and began to survey their surroundings, her mind rapidly formulating a plan. "Okay, let's start by gathering whatever supplies we can find. food, water, first aid kits, anything that might be useful. The family split up, each scouring the aisles for essential items. Ethan, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity, carefully selected canned goods and bottled water, while Lily grabbed flashlights and batteries. Sarah and Tom worked together, securing the entrances and windows, barricading them with heavy shelving units and whatever else they could find. As they worked, the relentless pounding and moaning from outside only grew louder, a constant reminder of the horrific threat that lurked just beyond their fragile defenses. Sarah's heart raced, and she couldn't help but glance nervously towards the barricaded doors, half expecting to see the grotesque, twisted faces of the zombies pressing against the glass. "Do you think they'll get in?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling as he joined his parents by the front of the store. "We won't let them," Tom replied, his voice firm and reassuring, even as he placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder. "We're going to stay right here, and we're going to keep you and your sister safe, no matter what." Sarah nodded, her own fear temporarily eclipsed by the fierce determination to protect her family. "That's right. We're going to hunker down and wait this out. Everything's going to be okay." As the hours ticked by, the family settled into a cautious routine, rationing their supplies and taking turns keeping watch. The sounds of the zombies outside never ceased, a constant, unsettling reminder of the peril that lurked beyond their makeshift sanctuary. Sarah found herself alternating between moments of hope and despair, her mind racing with questions and concerns. How long could they truly hold out? What if their supplies ran out? And most terrifying of all, what if the zombies found a way in? Clutching her children close, Sarah silently prayed that they would find a way to survive this nightmare. Her love for her family, the only thing keeping her from succumbing to the overwhelming sense of dread that threatened to consume her. As the days ticked by in the relative safety of the Maple Grove grocery store, the family's supplies began to dwindle. Sarah, Tom, Lily, and Ethan rationed their food and water, carefully portioning out the diminishing resources in a desperate attempt to make them last. The constant moans and pounding of the zombies outside never ceased, a haunting and unnerving soundtrack to their struggle for survival. Occasionally, the family would catch glimpses of the shambling, pallid figures through the barricaded windows, a chilling reminder of the threat that loomed just beyond their makeshift sanctuary. One evening, as Sarah and the children huddled together on the cold linoleum floor, Tom approached them with a grim expression. "We're running low on supplies," he announced, his voice laced with concern. "I need to go out and scavenge for more food and water." Sarah felt her heart sink, the prospect of Tom venturing out into the zombie-infested streets filling her with dread. "But it's too dangerous. What if you don't come back?" Tom placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his eyes steady and resolute. "I have to, Sarah. We can't keep living like this, constantly on the edge of starvation. I'll be careful, I promise." Lily and Ethan's eyes widened with fear, and they both clung to their mother, their small voices pleading with their father not to go. "I don't want you to leave," Ethan cried, his lower lip trembling. "Hey, it's going to be okay," Tom said, kneeling down to pull his son into a tight embrace. "I'll come back, I swear. I'm not going to leave you guys." Sarah bit her lip, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She knew Tom was right. They couldn't survive much longer without replenishing their dwindling supplies. But the thought of him venturing out into the zombie-infested streets was enough to fill her with a paralyzing sense of dread. "Please be careful," she whispered, reaching out to cup his face in her hands. "Come back to us, no matter what." Tom nodded, his expression grave but determined. "I will. I love you all, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep us alive." With one last lingering glance, Tom stepped out from behind the barricade, his footsteps receding as he disappeared into the darkened aisles of the grocery store. Sarah and the children huddled together, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and hope, praying that Tom would return safely. Hours ticked by, and the family waited with bated breath, straining to hear any sound that might signal Tom's return. But as the night wore on, There was only the ever-present moaning and groaning of the zombies outside, a constant reminder of the peril that lurked beyond their fragile sanctuary. When the first glimmer of dawn finally crept through the windows, Sarah's heart sank as she saw a familiar figure shambling towards the barricade, its skin a sickly, pallid hue. Clutching her children close, she steeled herself for the unthinkable, praying that somehow, against all odds, her beloved husband would find a way back to them. As the shambling figure drew closer, Sarah's heart sank with dread. There was no mistaking the gaunt, lifeless features and the vacant, glassy eyes. It was Tom, but he was no longer the man she had known and loved. The terrible bite mark on his arm could only mean one thing. He had been infected and transformed into one of the undead. Lily and Ethan clung to Sarah, their bodies trembling with fear as they watched their father's approach. Sarah wrapped her arms protectively around her children, her mind racing with the agonizing decision she now faced. "What do we do, Mommy?" Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. Sarah's grip tightened, her own eyes brimming with unused tears. I don't know, sweetie." The sound of the barricade being pounded drew their attention, and they watched in horror as Tom's lifeless hands clawed at the makeshift defenses, his jaw working open and closed in a mindless, hungry haze. Sarah knew that they could not keep him out forever. The zombies were relentless, and sooner or later, their barricade would give way. She also knew that she could not allow Tom, her beloved husband, to become a threat to their children. The realization tore at her heart, but she knew what she had to do. Gently, she disentangled herself from Lily and Ethan, stepping towards the barricade. "Wait here," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll handle this." With a deep, shuddering breath, Sarah approached the pounding figure, her hands trembling as she retrieved a metal crowbar from a nearby shelf. She steeled herself, her gaze locked with Tom's lifeless eyes, before finally bringing the crowbar down with a sickening crack. The children cried out in horror, their sobs echoing through the empty store as Sarah collapsed to her knees, the crowbar slipping from her hands. Tears streamed down her face, and she allowed herself a moment of anguished grief before once again pulling her children into a fierce embrace. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with sorrow. "But I had to. I couldn't let him hurt you." Lily and Ethan clung to their mother, their own tears mingling with hers as they grappled with the devastating loss of their father. The family huddled together, their hearts heavy with grief and the weight of the unimaginable decision they had been forced to make. As the sun rose higher, casting an eerie golden glow through the barricaded windows, Sarah knew that they could not stay here forever. They would have to venture out, to find a safer place to weather the horrors of this new apocalyptic world. But for now, she held her children close, offering them what comfort she could as they mourned the loss of their beloved father. The days that followed were a blur of grief, fear, and desperate survival for Sarah and her children. The once familiar streets of Maple Grove had become a nightmarish gauntlet, filled with the shambling, groaning forms of the undead. Sarah knew they could not remain holed up in the grocery store indefinitely. Their supplies were dwindling, and the constant threat of the zombies breaking through their barricade loomed ever larger. One morning, as Lily and Ethan huddled together, their eyes red-rimmed from countless tears, Sarah approached them with a sense of grim determination. "We can't stay here anymore," she said, her voice steady despite the anguish that still plagued her heart. "It's not safe, and we need to find a way out of the city." Lily looked up at her mother, her expression one of trepidation. "But where will we go? What if the zombies get us?" Sarah reached out and gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you and your brother safe." Just then, the sound of a commotion outside drew their attention. Peering cautiously through the barricaded windows, they spotted a small group of survivors making their way down the street, their movements quick and purposeful. "Look!" Ethan exclaimed, his voice tinged with a glimmer of hope. "Maybe they know a safe place we can go." Sarah hesitated, her mind weighing the risks of venturing out against the potential benefits of joining forces with others. But as she watched the group disappear around the corner, she knew they had to take the chance. "Okay, let's go," she said, her voice firm. "Stick close to me, and be as quiet as you can. We don't want to attract any unwanted attention." Gathering what few supplies they could carry, the small family slipped out from behind the barricade and into the eerily silent streets. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as they navigated the maze of abandoned vehicles and debris, constantly on the lookout for any signs of the undead. As they rounded a corner, they caught sight of the survivors once more, their movements quick and efficient as they made their way towards what appeared to be a church in the distance. "There," Sarah whispered, her voice laced with both hope and trepidation. "Let's try to catch up with them." Lily and Ethan followed close behind, their steps quickening as they neared the church. Sarah's mind raced, weighing the potential risks and benefits of approaching this group of strangers. But as they drew closer, she noticed a familiar face among them, a former military officer named Jack, who had once been a regular customer at the grocery store. Steeling her nerves, Sarah called out to the group, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jack, wait, please." The grizzled ex-soldier turned, his expression hardening as he caught sight of the small family. But as his gaze met Sarah's, something in his demeanor softened, and he motioned for them to join the group. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and gruff, "I was wondering if you'd made it this far. Come on, we've got a plan to get out of the city." Sarah felt a surge of relief, even as a new wave of trepidation washed over her. With a deep breath, she ushered Lily and Ethan forward, praying that this chance encounter would be the first step towards a new, safer life for her family. As Sarah and her children joined the small group of survivors, led by the former military officer Jack, a glimmer of hope began to take root in her heart. These people seemed organized and capable, a stark contrast to the chaos and desperation Sarah and her family had endured in the grocery store. "What's the plan?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Jack's expression was grave, but there was a determined glint in his eye. "We've heard rumors of a safe zone on the outskirts of the city. It's a long shot, but it's the best chance we've got." Sarah nodded, her mind already whirling with the implications. "How do we get there?" "The streets are overrun with those things. We'll have to move quickly and quietly," Jack replied, his gaze sweeping over the group. "Stay close and follow my lead. I'll do my best to get us there in one piece." With a nod, the group set off, navigating the abandoned streets with a sense of purpose and caution. Sarah kept a tight grip on Lily and Ethan's hands, her heart pounding as they encountered the occasional shambling figure of the undead. Jack and the others moved with a practiced efficiency, using stealth and quick reflexes to avoid detection. As they drew closer to the outskirts of the city, Sarah felt a sense of cautious optimism. Perhaps, against all odds, they would find the elusive safe zone and a chance to start anew. But those hopes were quickly dashed as they rounded a corner and were confronted with a horrifying sight. The once vibrant community center that had been their rumored destination had been overrun, the building's windows shattered, and the ground strewn with the bodies of the infected. Moans and snarls echoed from within, a chilling reminder of the fate that had befallen those who had sought refuge there. Sarah felt her heart sink, and she instinctively pulled her children closer. "No," she whispered, her voice laced with despair. Jack's expression darkened, and he quickly ushered the group towards a nearby abandoned warehouse. "We need to find another place to hold up," he said, his voice low and urgent. "That safe zone is a bust. We'll have to regroup and come up with a new plan." As they barricaded themselves inside the warehouse, Sarah surveyed the small group, her gaze lingering on the faces of her children. Lily and Ethan, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty, clung to her, and she knew she had to find a way to keep them safe. "What now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing with determination. "We make our stand here. We fortify this place, and we fight. It's our only chance." Sarah knew deep down that their options were dwindling, but the thought of facing the overwhelming horde of undead outside filled her with a sense of dread. Nonetheless, she steeled her resolve, knowing that for her children's sake, she had no choice but to face the horrors that lay ahead. As the survivors barricaded themselves inside the abandoned warehouse, the sounds of the undead outside grew ever more insistent, their moans and snarls echoing through the cavernous space. Sarah held Lily and Ethan close, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and determination. She knew that they were running out of options, and that the only way to ensure their survival was to make a stand against the relentless horde. Jack, the former military officer, quickly took charge, marshaling the small group of survivors into an organized defense. He directed them to fortify the entrances and windows, using whatever heavy objects they could find to create a formidable barrier. "We need to be ready for when they break through," Jack said, his voice gruff but steady. "Everyone, grab a weapon and get ready to fight." Sarah reluctantly released her children, her maternal instinct warring with the knowledge that she needed to contribute to the defense. Scanning the warehouse, she found a sturdy metal pipe and gripped it tightly, her knuckles turning white. As the pounding and groaning grew louder, the survivors took their positions, their eyes fixed on the barricaded doors and windows. Lily and Ethan huddled together, their faces pale with fear, but they too had been given makeshift weapons, their small hands trembling as they held them. The first wave of zombies crashed against the barricade, their clawing hands and gnashing teeth sending shudders through the structure. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the survivors spring into action, swinging their improvised weapons with a ferocity born of desperation. Beside her, Lily and Ethan fought with a determination that belied their young age, their faces contorted with the effort of fending off the undead. Sarah felt a rush of pride and anguish, knowing that her children had been forced to grow up far too quickly in this nightmarish world. The battle raged on, the survivors pushing back the horde with every ounce of strength they could muster. Sarah lost track of time, her focus entirely consumed by the need to protect her family and survive. As the onslaught continued, Sarah could see the toll it was taking on the group. One by one, their companions fell, succumbing to the relentless onslaught of the zombies. She felt a lump in her throat as she witnessed their agonizing demises, but she knew she could not afford to dwell on their losses. Driven by her fierce maternal instinct, Sarah fought with a ferocity that surprised even herself, her pipe connecting with the skulls of the undead with sickening cracks. Lily and Ethan, their faces streaked with tears and grime, stood by her side, their own weapons raised in defiance. The battle raged on, the survivors' resolve tested to its limits. But Sarah refused to give in, her love for her children fueling her determination to see them through this nightmare, no matter the cost. As the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over the battered warehouse, the survivors' final stand against the undead horde showed no signs of abating. Sarah, Lily, and Ethan fought alongside the remaining members of the group, their bodies aching with exhaustion but their spirits unbroken. With each passing moment, the barricade groaned and strained under the relentless onslaught of the zombies, and Sarah knew that their makeshift defenses would not hold much longer. Her heart pounded in her chest as she swung her pipe, striking down the shambling figures that lurched towards her and her children. Beside her, Lily and Ethan, their faces streaked with grime and tears, fought with a ferocity that belied their young age. Sarah felt a surge of both pride and anguish, knowing that her children had been forced to grow up far too quickly in the face of this nightmare. As the battle wore on, the survivors' numbers dwindled, one by one succumbing to the overwhelming horde. Sarah watched in horror as Jack, the stalwart leader who had guided them this far, was pulled down by the undead, his anguished cries echoing through the cavernous space. "No," Sarah cried, her voice hoarse and filled with despair. She redoubled her efforts, her pipe connecting with the skulls of the zombies with sickening cracks, but she knew that their chances of survival were dwindling with each passing moment. Lily and Ethan, their eyes wild with fear, clung to her, their small hands gripping her tattered clothing as they fought for their lives. Sarah pulled them close, her own tears mingling with theirs as she whispered words of comfort and encouragement. "It's going to be okay," she lied, her heart breaking at the realization that their fight for survival might be coming to an end. As the barricade finally gave way, the horde of zombies surged forward, their groans and snarls filling the air. Sarah braced herself, her pipe raised in a last-ditch effort to protect her children, when a sudden flash of movement caught her eye. A small band of survivors, bloodied and weary, had joined the fray, their weapons cutting through the undead with a renewed sense of purpose. Sarah watched in stunned silence as they fought their way towards her and her children, their faces etched with determination. "Come with us," one of the survivors shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of the battle. "We've got a place to hold up. It's not much, but it's better than this." Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed Lily and Ethan's hands and followed the newcomers, her heart pounding with a glimmer of hope. As they navigated the devastated streets, the moans and snarls of the undead echoing in their wake, Sarah knew that their fight for survival was far from over. Clutching her children close, she resolved to do whatever it took to keep them alive. Even in the face of this unimaginable horror, the future might be uncertain, but Sarah was determined to forge ahead. Her love for her family, the only thing that could sustain her in this new, unforgiving world.